In today's video, we are talking about the toxic impact that having a narcissistic parent has on their children. And while the impact will vary a little depending on what role the narcissistic parent assigns to each child and each child's own personality and character traits, there are some fundamental truths about the impact these types of parents have on their children that will need to be addressed and healed when these people become adults in order to have a happy and successful life. And today we are going to talk about in detail some of those fundamental truths and how to heal them. But first, if you're new to my channel, I'd like to take a moment and welcome you and invite you to please subscribe and be sure and hit that notification bell because I put out new videos every week. Also, if you are interested in private one-on-one narcissistic abuse recovery coaching with me, please visit my website. It is linked in the description below. So today we're talking about the toxic impact that a narcissistic parent has on their children. And the first thing we are going to discuss is how the intergenerational trauma and relationship patterns the narcissistic parent has absorbed and developed impact the child. Narcissistic parenting creates a cycle of intergenerational trauma, meaning they pass down patterns of dysfunction, emotional neglect, and maladaptive behaviors from one generation to the next. Children raised by narcissistic parents absorb extremely unhealthy relational dynamics as their baseline for normalcy, shaping how they view themselves and interact with others. This becomes an internalized blueprint and manifests in two primary ways. The adult child will either repeat the cycle of abuse or they will become overly submissive to avoid conflict and develop people-pleasing behaviors. Both outcomes are tragic and rob the child of their authenticity and developing into who they were truly meant to be, as well as making them more susceptible to falling victim to narcissistic partners and friends. Next, emotional parentification. Emotional parentification occurs when a narcissistic parent forces their child to meet their emotional needs instead of fulfilling the child's developmental needs, reversing the natural parent-child dynamic. The narcissistic parent often treats the child as a confidant or emotional caretaker, sharing inappropriate personal struggles or seeking validation and comfort from the child. This dynamic robs the child of a normal childhood, burdening them with adult responsibilities they are not equipped to handle. Over time, the child learns to suppress their own emotions and prioritize the parent's needs, leading to chronic people-pleasing, emotional suppression, and difficulty setting boundaries in adulthood. Emotional parentification creates a deep sense of obligation and guilt, leaving the child feeling responsible for the parent's well-being while neglecting their own. This role reversal fosters resentment and emotional exhaustion, often affecting the child's ability to form healthy relationships and prioritize self-care later in life. Next, a narcissistic parent instills a distorted view of love in their child, equating love with conditional approval, control, and self-sacrifice. Instead of experiencing unconditional love and acceptance, the child learns that love must be earned through compliance, achievements, or meeting the parent's emotional needs. This creates a harmful belief system where the child associates love with performance, fear of rejection, or even manipulation. As a result, the child grows up seeking validation from others, often tolerating toxic or imbalanced relationships that mirror the dynamics they experienced with their parent. This distorted view of love leaves the child feeling unworthy of genuine affection and unsure how to establish healthy reciprocal relationships. Overcoming this requires unlearning these ingrained patterns and redefining love as a mutual, respectful, and nurturing connection. Next, a narcissistic parent fosters a shame-based identity in their child by consistently criticizing, devaluing, or invalidating them. Through constant blame, humiliation, and unrealistic expectations, the child internalizes a belief that they are fundamentally flawed, inadequate, or unworthy of love. This pervasive shame becomes the foundation of their self-concept, leading them to view themselves through a lens of self-doubt and negativity. Unlike guilt, which arises from actions, shame affects the child's core sense of being, creating feelings of unworthiness that usually persist into adulthood. This shame-based identity often drives behaviors like people-pleasing, perfectionism, or self-sabotage as the individual seeks external validation to compensate for their internalized feelings of inadequacy. Healing from a shame-based identity requires fostering self-compassion, challenging internalized negative beliefs, and redefining self-worth independent of the parent's influence. Next, and this is a big one, a narcissistic parent undermines their child's ability to trust their intuition by consistently invalidating the child's thoughts, feelings, and perceptions. Through tactics such as gaslighting, dismissiveness, or controlling behavior, the parent teaches the child to doubt their instincts and defer to the parent's version of reality. Over time, the child learns to suppress their inner voice, fearing that their judgments or feelings are wrong or will lead to conflict. This lack of trust in their own intuition often carries into adulthood, making it incredibly difficult for the individual to make decisions, recognize red flags in relationships, or set boundaries. Rebuilding trust in one's intuition involves reconnecting with personal feelings and learning to validate and act on them without fear of criticism or rejection. Next, and this is another big one, a narcissistic parent's self-centered behavior and emotional unavailability hinder their child's ability to develop empathy. Empathy is typically cultivated through nurturing reciprocal relationships in which a child's emotions are acknowledged and validated. However, narcissistic parents often dismiss, ridicule, or ignore their child's feelings, teaching them that emotional expression is unimportant or even dangerous. Additionally, the child is often so preoccupied with managing the parent's needs or avoiding conflict that they lack the opportunity to explore and understand others' emotions. This can lead to difficulties in forming deep, meaningful relationships and may even result in the child adopting self-protective narcissistic traits themselves. On the flip side, this can also manifest in the child never developing any empathy or compassion for themselves because they were never shown any empathy or role modeled this from their narcissistic parent. Meaning the child internalizes the critical and judgmental voice of their narcissistic parent, resulting in absurd standards that in reality could never be achieved. This adult child lives a life where they are ridiculed and judged by an internal voice who never shows them any forgiveness or grace. Either consequence is incredibly damaging and will be challenging, if not impossible, to overcome. Next, a narcissistic parent's inconsistent and self-centered behavior disrupts the formation of a safe and secure attachment between parent and child. Secure attachment requires a caregiver to consistently meet the child's emotional and physical needs with warmth, responsiveness, and unconditional love. In contrast, a narcissistic parent is often emotionally unavailable, erratic, or dismissive, leaving the child uncertain about whether their needs will be met. This creates an insecure attachment style where the child may become anxious and over-clingy, fearing abandonment, or emotionally avoidant to protect themselves from disappointment. The lack of safe attachment profoundly impacts the child's ability to trust others, form healthy relationships, and feel emotionally secure as an adult. Healing involves recognizing these attachment patterns and fostering healthier connections through self-awareness, possibly therapy, and relationships built on mutual trust and consistency. Next, a narcissistic parent often fosters perfectionism in their child by setting unrealistically high expectations and tying their love and approval to the child's achievements. This conditional love teaches the child that their worth is dependent on meeting or exceeding the parent's standards, leaving no room for mistakes or imperfection. The child internalizes a relentless drive to succeed, often becoming hyper-focused on excelling academically, professionally, or socially to gain the parent's fleeting validation. However, perfectionism can lead to chronic stress, fear of failure, and an inability to celebrate accomplishments, as the child feels they are never good enough. This toxic mindset persists into adulthood, causing burnout, self-criticism, and difficulty embracing vulnerability. Overcoming perfectionism involves challenging the belief that self-worth is tied to performance, practicing self-compassion, and learning to accept imperfection as part of being human. Next, a narcissistic parent stifles their child's identity development by prioritizing their own needs and desires over the child's individuality. These parents often see their child as an extension of themselves rather than as a separate person, dictating the child's choices, interests, and behaviors to align with their own image or expectations. The child is discouraged or even punished for expressing independence, developing personal preferences, or challenging the parent's control. Over time, the child learns to suppress their authentic self, adopting a false persona to please the parent and avoid conflict. This stifling of identity leaves the child with feelings of confusion, low self-worth, and a lack of clarity about who they are as an individual. Reclaiming one's identity in adulthood involves rediscovering personal values, interests, and passions, and breaking free from the internalized need for external validation. And finally, a narcissistic parent often projects their unfulfilled dreams onto their child, treating the child as a vehicle to achieve the success or recognition they were unable to attain. This dynamic places immense pressure on the child to conform to the parent's aspirations, whether in academics, career, sports, or other pursuits. The child's individuality and personal desires are dismissed as secondary, as the parent seeks to live vicariously through their achievements. This projection creates a sense of obligation and guilt in the child, who fears disappointing the parent by pursuing their own path. Over time, this can lead to resentment, burnout, and a lack of fulfillment as the child's life becomes centered around meeting the parent's expectations. Breaking free from this dynamic involves recognizing and challenging the parent's projections, setting boundaries, and exploring personal passions and goals independent of parental influence. Okay, that's going to do it for today's video. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and please subscribe to my channel. Also, follow me on my other social media platforms. The links are in the description below. Thanks for watching, everyone.